Hi, I'm Maggie. You ever been afraid your parents are separating? I never even thought about it before. My family's gotta be the happiest in the world. My parents are the youngest among the kids in my grade. They've always been fun and stylish, so much that I sometimes thought I'm the parent here. I used to think my parents love each other, but once my mom met a school teacher and started acting funny, our old history teacher retired, and Mr. Johnson took her place, a young teacher who just moved into town. I really enjoy history. I like learning about how people used to live before. And I really was anxious about the new teacher. But I shouldn't have worried. Mr. Johnson turned out to be really nice. He could weave a great story about the most boring things. Everyone was just enamored of him, even my mom. She went to a teacher welcome meeting and gushed about how much she liked him. She was glowing. I loved Mr. Johnson's lessons, and he offered private tutoring soon. I was thinking to major in history at college in a couple of years, and he wanted to help me prepare. I was so happy. Mr. Johnson started coming over to our house, and it was obvious that my parents liked him. Then I started noticing he spends a lot of time with them, even more so than with me, even though we did study hard. He started coming over simply to visit. He would tell my mom nice things, and they would exchange long looks. When two people behave that way, it means they're more than friends. I didn't want to even think about it, and my dad didn't notice. Once after school, I was with friends at the mall. We had the weekend ahead of us and didn't have to worry about school. Then suddenly my friend Edith stopped as if she noticed something weird. She pointed at a small cafe. I looked that way and saw Mom and Mr. Johnson. They were sitting together at a table, heads leaned really close and talking. They were so close, I thought they'd kiss. I was pretty sure then that my mom is in love with my school teacher and is cheating on Dad behind his back. I was shocked. The worst thing, I was sort of stupefied. I didn't know what to say or do. My friends really felt for me, and I just didn't know how to act. If I told Dad, I'd betray Mom. If I didn't tell Dad, I'd betray him. I finally decided to talk to Mom and tell her I know. I asked her how she could do this to me and Dad. Mom looked surprised, angry. She said she doesn't know what I'm talking about, and that Mr. Johnson is her and Dad's friend. Don't let it get into your head, Maggie, she said. There went nothing. I was really at a loss. Then I thought about Edith. We'd been best friends and always shared things with each other. So I went to Edith and told her about all of this. She listened carefully. We talked for a long time and thought of my next course of action. And we finally decided that each person has a right to act the way they think is right. And so did I. I stayed late after classes that day. After everyone had left, I went to Mr. Johnson. I said we needed to talk, and that I knew everything. He was surprised and acted as if he didn't understand. I said I love both my mom and dad and want them to be happy, even if they're not together. That they are both grown-ups and it's their decision to make, and I was not going to interfere. That I wouldn't tell. Mr. Johnson said he respected me and my parents a lot. He tried to say something else, but I didn't let him finish. I did something I'd longed to do for a long time. I kissed him. He was taken aback and looked like he'd seen a ghost. He tried to push me away, but at that moment, Edith came in. "Mr. Johnson, what are you doing?" she cried out. He was too shocked to say a word. I smiled and said, "See, Mr. Johnson, I'm not going to let you ruin my family." At that time, I felt a kind of gloating satisfaction. I thought I'd given him his due. I said if he ever came close to Mom again, I'll report him for harassment, and his teaching career will be done in for. He tried to say something, but I wouldn't listen. Edith and I left. We were happy that our plan worked, but I felt uneasy. Edith thought it was logical, because you didn't get to kiss a person who's in love with your mom every day. Mr. Johnson stopped coming over and hanging out with my parents. He avoided me at school, only addressing me in class, very rarely. Mom and Dad couldn't figure out why Mr. Johnson stopped being friends with them so abruptly. They seemed genuinely upset. They kept talking about him. Even though I was glad I saved my parents' marriage, I also felt kind of bad and ashamed. Maybe I should have done what I'd told Mr. Johnson and let them figure it out on their own. Mom saw that something was eating at me and finally asked me straight on what was going on. I realized I couldn't keep this secret any longer and confessed. I said that I only wanted her and Dad to be happy. Mom was shocked. She couldn't believe her ears. She kept asking, how could I even think of something like this? She said that Mr. Johnson came so often, not because of her, but because of Dad. It turned out Dad and him were childhood friends and went to school together. They grew up together. They lost contact and then met again. And that day I saw Mom in a cafe with Mr. Johnson. They'd been picking out a gift for Dad's birthday. Mom wanted to surprise Dad and asked Mr. Johnson for advice. I asked Dad, and he confirmed Mom's story. He even showed me a yearbook pic where he and Mr. Johnson were together. He really had been his best friend, and it had been a miracle that they'd met again. And Dad was so happy about it. And Dad also said he didn't want to tell me, so that didn't feel like that's the reason why he was tutoring me, and that it was him who asked Mr. Johnson to help me out with college. I felt absolutely horrible. I wanted to keep my family intact, but I could have ruined a nice person's life. I felt absolutely horrendous about myself. My parents asked me to apologize to Mr. Johnson, and I said of course, even though I had no idea how I was going to look him in the eye and not die of mortification. I waited for him after class and stammered out an apology and an explanation. I said I was a complete idiot to risk his career and even freedom like that I didn't think, that I was so sorry, and I wished I could make it up to him somehow. At first, he just listened. And then he said that he understood, and he wasn't angry, and he gave me a sad smile. And then he blurted out unexpectedly that, in fact, I was absolutely right, and he really is in love with my mom. I was shocked dumb. He sighed and went on. No worries, Maggie. I've no intentions of acting upon it. No one will ever know about my feelings but you, he said, and he sounded really sure. He confessed that my dad was and always had been his only true friend, and he knew how Mom and him are happy. Still shell-bombed, I promised not to say anything to my parents so that they could still be friends. I kept my promise. Life got back on track. Later, Mr. Johnson met a nice girl. They got married and moved. I still think about that case. I'm so happy I found it in me to talk to Mom and risked being misunderstood. It could have ended so differently. Have you ever acted before you thought it out and regretted it? Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell not to miss the next videos. Likes are greatly appreciated. And if you shared this with your friends, I'm happy. Have a good day.